Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Today, I want to talk about Pinterest. I've been getting a lot of questions recently on whether I still like Pinterest, whether I'm still invested in it, and whether I still believe in its management team. So here goes. So Pinterest is one of the worst performers in its sector. It peaked at above 90 to about $90 per share in 2021. It's down to just around $21 as I'm speaking, so down about 75% from the highs. And to be fair, there are some reasons. Pinterest revenue kind of really slowed down. A year ago, Pinterest revenue grew 125% year over year as people were stuck at home from the pandemic and had a lot of time on their hands to sit around and browse Pinterest. In the most recent quarter, Pinterest revenue was up just 9% year over year. So that's a pretty big decline. It was somewhat expected as the world, reopened and started to return to normal that people wouldn't be sitting inside as much and on their computers as much, but it's still kind of a shock to the system, I guess you'd say. Pinterest user base has kind of declined over the past few quarters. It's down 5% year over year. Normally, that would be a big alarm sign with a social media company, but again, um, with the world returning to normal, this was somewhat expected, and it seems to have stabilized. Pinterest user base was flat over the past 2 quarters at about 433 million active users, so that's a good sign. About one-fifth of Pinterest users are in the US, and about a quarter of them are in Europe, and a little over half are all over the rest of the world. That'll come into play a little bit later on. Pinterest expense structure kind of ramped up over the past year. This is also in the bad category. Its cost of revenue went from 20% of revenue to 24% over the past year. R&D spending went from 18% to 23% of revenue. Presumably, this has a lot to do with Pinterest's recent pivot to e-commerce from its traditional just basic advertising model, but we can only speculate on that. All we know for sure is that costs are up a little bit. Margins are down as a result of all that, but Pinterest is still a profitable business. It's still doing okay. Um, on the good side of things, revenue growth outside of the US and Europe, where over half of its users are based, was 71% year over year. So 9% overall revenue growth, but 71% in the rest of the world. Its average revenue per user was up 17% year over year throughout its entire user base. But in that outside of the US and Europe category, it was up 80% per user. This is one of its biggest opportunities. The average US Pinterest user generated $5.82 in revenue for the company in the second quarter. The average European user generated just 86 cents of revenue for Pinterest in the latest quarter. The average user outside of those two areas generated just 10 cents for the company in the second quarter. So less than 2% of the revenue of the average US user. And this is where half of its user base is, 52% to be exact. So keep that in mind. That's one of its biggest opportunities going forward is to figure out how to monetize its international user base. It's really leaning into e-commerce, and this is kind of the make or break thesis on the company right now. Longtime CEO and co-founder Ben Silbermann recently stepped down to the role of executive chairman. They hired Bill Reddy as the new CEO. He was former Google president of commerce and payments, and they've made clear that in the next generation of the company's growth story, they are going to act as they're going to act on all these e-commerce opportunities they see. They've already partnered with Shopify to build out product pins. They acquired a fashion shopping platform called the Yes. They're really going all in on e-commerce, and if it pays off, it could be huge. Pinterest's platform has a bunch of natural applications to e-commerce. It's a place where you go to find ideas, and people eventually buy those ideas. We used Pinterest for home improvement ideas around my house, and then we went out and bought things and made home improvements. So why not be a part of that process? Is Pinterest's management's take on it? There's obviously a lot of execution risk here. If it was easy to build out a big e-commerce social media network platform, anyone would do it. It's a challenge. The other big social media companies haven't really integrated e-commerce into their traditional advertising models yet either. So it's an untested part of the social media landscape, but one that could pay off big time if they're successful. So Pinterest is one of the 5 largest stock positions in my own portfolio. It's the social media network out of the major ones that I think has the most growth potential. And I think this could be a big winner for patient investors if the new management can capitalize on its opportunity. It still has a lot of room to grow its user base, monetize its user base, build out social media. And if it can do that, it could be a big winner. This video is sponsored by the Motley Fool. Check out the link in the description to receive the top 10 best stocks to buy now or visit fool.com/Frankel.